Okay, I've been interrupted twice. I forgot to turn the telephone on to silent, so let's see if we can get through this one. After the Industrial Revolution, our country experienced such a massive change and a quick change. Economically, socially. Socially because we had a huge influx of immigrants. We were sitting pretty in the early 1800s. I'm talking 1815, 1820, 1830, 40. We were advancing and growing and expanding, and we were the country that the Europeans across the big pond, as they call it, across the Atlantic, they were looking at us and saying, whoa, I'm going to go there. They've got what I can't get here in Europe, and that's a job, better quality of life. This is what the immigrants were thinking. So in 1820, we had about 200,000 immigrants come into the country. Now, the Industrial Revolution was around 1815, so 5 years later we have 200,000 immigrants come in. But then from 1820 to 1840, we had 700,000 come. They mostly came from England, which was no problem for the people that were already here because they were basically English. They came from Germany. Again, not too much of a problem because the Germans, once they landed, they were willing to learn English, assimilate, that's a term you should be familiar with, assimilate into the American society. And the third group that came over were Irish from Ireland. Here's where the problem lay. And what I'm about to explain in this lecture, this is history. I'm not passing judgment one way or the other. I'm just telling you what happened. When the Irish came over, they were Catholics. This country was white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. Let me give you a quick history on religion. Catholics and Protestants are all Christians. They all believe in the same God. They believe in the same Christ. They just go about different ways of how they're going to practice their faith and what they believe in. But the basic point is God and Jesus is the same for both Catholics and Protestants. The basis to Protestants, the only Christian religion that existed for over 1,000 years, after Christ died, a couple hundred years later, we have an organized religion, and it was the Catholics. And then the Roman Empire fell, and it was the Catholic Church that was able to step in and offer some order in a world of chaos. Christianity didn't become legal until around we'll say the 300s. So from the 300s until the 1500s, for 1,200 years, the only Christian religion were the Catholics. Along came Martin Luther, a priest. By the way, all the stuff I'm telling you about religion, it won't be on any test. This is just background information. Martin Luther, he was a Catholic priest. He was also a professor in Germany, and he went to college and he wrote up 99 things that he said he thought was wrong with the Catholic Church. He invited his students to debate these ideas, so with the intention of let's improve the Catholic Church. Well, the people who read these 99 things said, yeah, Martin, you got that right. These things are what's wrong with the Catholic Church, and we don't want to be Catholics anymore. We're going to take these 99 ideas that you have, they were called the 99 Theses, and we're going to protest against the Catholic Church. Thus, you have the base to the word Protestants. Protestants. We pronounce it Protestants, but the base of the word is protest. They were protesting against the Catholic Church. Not against God, not against Christ. They were protesting against the way the Catholic Church was handling affairs. So we have a division in the Christian religion, Catholics and Protestants. And in Ireland, the English took over Ireland, made it one of their protectorates, ruled over it, gave away land as, what do I want to say? When wars are fought and you're the victor, spoils. They gave away land for men who fought well and deserved a reward, and maybe the English treasury didn't have enough money, so they gave away land in Ireland. literally taking away from the people that lived there. So the Irish people weren't very happy with the English people. And the English were Protestants and the Irish were Catholics. So when the Irish come over here to America, which was known for its tolerance of all religions, the Irish brought their Catholic religion and they weren't really welcome very much where they landed. And they would move into neighborhoods and live with other Irish. And yes, they could speak English because the English ruled Ireland, but they also spoke Gaelic, which real tough language. It's one of those languages that one word can be 27 consonants and one vowel. How do you pronounce that? They would live in their communities and they wouldn't really assimilate. They didn't try to be Americans, and this was an issue. There's a movie called Leonardo DiCaprio is in it. The Gangs of New York, I think it might be called, and that's about the Irish, how they were living. So 700,000 people come over in just 2 decades, in a 20-year period, from England, Germany, and Ireland. And it's the ones coming in from Ireland, they're starting to ruffle the feathers of the people who had been here for generations. And those people began to think of themselves as nativists, a word you need to understand. Nativists, nativists. These are people who believe themselves to be, part of the descendants of the founders, and that they're English and they're Anglo-Saxons and they're Protestants. So now these nativists, they start to debate whether or not maybe they should start shutting the doors. Maybe they should start setting limits on who gets to come into the country, because we wanted to keep the country pure. Well, what happened in Ireland? Now remember I said that America was the land of the plenty. And what had happened in Ireland is that they had suffered a famine. The potato. Did you know that you could live for 30 days on nothing but a potato? You have to eat the spud, you have to eat the eye, you have to eat all of it. Don't boil it, you change its properties. Don't fry it, you change its properties. But if you just ate potatoes for 30 days, you could survive. Well, the problem was this famine, this drought, this blight of the potato crop, which was the main source of food for these poor Irish, gone. 1/6 of the population of Ireland died during the famine. So they come to America. They're basically uneducated, they're poor, they're unskilled, they didn't send their kids to American schools, they made their own schools, they ensured that their Catholic religion was separate from the rest of America's religions, and they pour into the cities. These 700,000, they hit the shores on the East Coast, and they pour into the cities. The cities are unprepared. Garbage, the amount of raw and human garbage, if you know what I mean. Cities don't know what to do with all this. By the way, did you know that, can you picture in your head the old days, women would walk the streets with they were called parasols. We're going to call them an umbrella, but it was a parasol. They did that because people would throw their garbage out of their windows. So you carried your parasol to protect yourself from stuff flying out of the windows above you. So the garbage, it's everywhere. There's pigs, there's goats, there's animals living in the streets. The water's polluted. We have epidemics of cholera. People die in droves. If a fire takes place, you're going to have massive destruction. There is virtually, in the 1840s, there's virtually no police forces in these cities. I have some stats. In 1841, 350,000 people lived in New York City. There was no regular police force until 1848, after a girl was murdered. Get that, 350,000 people living in New York City. And there wasn't no one felt the need for a police force. sure there were thieves and whatnot, but you tended to I'm sorry, my screen just went blank, so I hope you still saw me. Let me start over. 350,000 people in New York City, and isn't it amazing that they didn't need a police force? They tended to police themselves until a girl is murdered. Then they decide they need something organized. And the reason we call police officers cops is because their original badges that they wore on their chest, they were made out of copper. And they originally were called coppers. Hate copper. Now we just call them cops. Let me give you an example of some of the life in cities, though. In St. Louis, or you can say St. Louis. It was a great trading city because it's on the rivers, but the roads were unpaved. So when it rained, they were so muddy. The joke was never pave the roads because you have better navigation when they're wet. You can boat down them. In 1820, there were 3 newspapers being produced out of St. Louis. There were playhouses, there were bookstores. It was a metropolis. The cities became political hotbeds for politicians where they would abuse immigrants for their personal gain. An immigrant would land in New York City. The mayor, who was pretty much the boss of the city, would send his underlings, send his guys down to the docks to meet the immigrants, meet them with find out if it's Germans coming in, have some bratwurst, have some rye bread, have things that will really touch their hearts and blankets and tell them, hey, we have somewhere for you to stay. Now it's going to be a tenement, and there's going to be 14 families living on one floor that really, we'll say 14 times 5, that's 70 people living on one floor that was made to house 20. And there will be only one bathroom on each floor for those 70 people. But then, once they become citizens, they're going to vote for that mayor because that mayor, he was so kind because he sent stuff down to greet us at the docks, and he helped us get a job, even though it's only for 20 cents a day, but he helped us get a job. There are going to be ethnic riots in the cities. This is another reason why you had to get an organized police force together. The riots were especially against the Irish. Convents were burned. Why a convent? Because that's where Catholic priests lived, and we weren't Catholic. Priests were assaulted. There were gangs in the cities. Do you know gangs? I've read accounts of gangs in France in the 1400s. Gangs are not something new. I'm sure they go back before the medieval times. But we have gangs. I have a name here in New York City. One of them was called the Plug Uglies. I don't know what it means. You already had Hell's Kitchen. That was already in existence. All these people coming in, these immigrants, particularly the Irish, I said they were living in tenement buildings. But it was only in the cities where there were jobs. So where else are they going to go? They became street sweepers, mostly meaning they were shoveling horse manure. They were chimney sweeps. They were, here's a job. By the way, every time I look down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. Do you know what a barber pole looks like, a real barber pole? It's white, and it has red wrapping circles on it. Kind of looks like a candy cane. That white pole is supposed to represent your arm, and those red swirls are supposed to represent veins. And what it meant was that the barber inside that establishment, when he had that kind of a logo out front, it meant that he could be your barber, he could be your dentist, he could be your doctor, he could bleed you. People believed that when you got sick, you'd go to your barber, he would slice you, bleed you, and put leeches on those bloody places to suck out the sickness. Anyhow, that's just, I'm a wealth of information of that kind. So people are in the cities. huge impact, the Industrial Revolution. One of the things that it impacts is transportation. In 1833, in New York City, there were 80 stagecoaches registered. Roads were built by private companies, and they would charge money to use their roads. They would take a long pole. So I don't know if you can see this if I go back far enough. They take a long pole, they have it on a base, and this pole could go down and up, and it was called a pike, and they would charge a toll, as in Route 90, the toll pike. So they would turn it, some of them go up and down, some of them went back and forth, but regardless, that's the base to the word toll pike. Taking goods across land was very expensive. Trying to travel across land, trying to transport across land. So most people were doing it on the water. Here I've got it. Took 75 days to get from Massachusetts to South Carolina, and that would be 4 horses pulling a cart. So it was a lot cheaper and faster. You could get across the ocean. In 1833, you could get across the ocean and back in less than 75 days. President Jefferson, back in the early 1800s, he's going to build the first national road from Maryland to South Carolina, and it's going to be a stone road. But it was water. It was water that really moved things. And here in Northwest Ohio, we have the Maumee River, and that was part of one of the largest canal systems and transportation of getting goods from the interior, we were considered the interior of the lands, to the coast. You would attach mules to a boat, and you would pull it along the canal. They built locks to get to the next level where the water would drop. It was an expensive thing building these canals, but 5 mules could pull 50 times more than 4 horses with a cart on a road. A guy by the name of Clinton, he was in New York. He passed a $7 million bond issue to fund a canal that he built from Erie Canal, which connected the Hudson River to the Lake Erie. 363 miles long. That was completed in 1825. So New York City could now get goods from the interior. And I'm going to change my page here. And getting those goods on the water meant, with the Industrial Revolution, meant a change in transportation, steam power. In 1817, right when the Industrial Revolution was breaking out, there were about 17 steamboats traveling on the lakes, on our canals. By 1840, 540 steamboats. We have a keel boat that was invented. It was pointed so its front and its back was basically the same, and it could go either way without having to turn around. It could go upriver, downriver. It had sails, oars, ropes, but they quickly were outdated once the steamboat came in. There are 2 types of steamboats that we're concerned with. One, it's called a stern, where the paddle is on the back. It was easier to tow. It could get through the channels pretty easily. If you watch the movie Maverick with Jodie Foster and Mel Gibson, and he's playing his poker game, that was a stern steamboat. Then there's the side wheelers. They took their paddles and put them on the sides of the boat, and that meant that they could turn a lot easier. They were much more maneuverable. It could take people, it could take goods, went a lot faster. They aren't real deep in the water, so the water doesn't have to be real high in order for them to be able to move. The cabins that were built on these steamboats, they held the rich people. The women were in the back, poor people in the back. but they could pull straight up to shore. They didn't need special docks. They only need 4 to 6 feet of water. That's really low. But here's the drawback. They only had a 4-year lifespan because they rotted. They didn't know how to treat wood back then. So these changes, let me see, I have one other change. I wanted somewhere, oh yeah. So, the last thing will be the railroad cars. So, our first major innovation are these steamboats, powered by burning fuel, as in wood. Then we get the railroads. In 1830, Peter Cooper built the Baltimore-Oriole Railroad. Baltimore and Ohio. What am I saying? Not Oriole. The Baltimore-Ohio Railroad, B&O Railroad. The very first train ever built was over in Europe. It was called the Tom Thumb. It was very small. And to show people the benefits of a train, they said, come out and witness this train. It's going to race against a horse, and the horse won. Now, the problem with trains, they too are fueled by steam. So you have to keep shoving your wood into this thing and burning them. So when the trains would come through, they would spit out ash and sparks, which would scare animals. When they started building these tracks through the wilderness, it's scaring, and if farmers or cattlemen would have cattle, I mean, it wasn't good. Could start fires, the sparks coming out, especially in Chicago when they had their first trains, the Loop, and it's all above head, and people learned real quickly to stay away from the engines that were coming through because you could get ash and sparks spit on top of your head. They broke down. Problem was, if you break down and you're 100 miles into the interior, who's going to come and fix you? So if you're that engineer, you need to know how to fix your engine, not just pilot it. But the benefits is they could get into the interior. They could get into places where we didn't need water. We could build our way into the interior of the nation. We could get goods to places faster, and more goods, and more people. We could expand across this nation, and that in the 1820s we have this thing called Manifest Destiny, which you should have come across in your textbook, that said we were given the God-given right to settle this nation. So the Industrial Revolution impacted cities economically, socially, politically. And I think that's what I'm going to leave you with. End of lecture. Bye.